The old VHS tape. 1. The discovery. It was a rainy Saturday when I stumbled upon the old VHS tape. I had been wandering through the flea market looking for nothing in particular when a small, dusty booth caught my eye. The vendor, an elderly man with sunken eyes and a crooked smile, beckoned me over. His table was cluttered with trinkets from another era, broken clocks, faded photographs, and of course the tape. It was unremarkable at first, glancing a plain black cassette with a handwritten label that simply read, "Do not watch." The words were scrawled in shaky, almost frantic handwriting, as if the person who wrote them had been in a hurry, or afraid. "How much for the tape?" I asked, holding it up. The old man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he didn't respond. Then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, he said, "Take it, no charge, but heed the warning." I laughed it off, assuming it was just part of the act. Vendors at flea markets love to add a little drama to their wares. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were still on me, watching me until I disappeared into the crowd. 2. The first viewing. That evening, curiosity got the better of me. I dug out an old VCR from the closet, dusted it off, and plugged it in. The machine whirred to life, and I inserted the tape. The screen flickered, and for a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, an image appeared. It was a dimly lit room, the kind you'd see in an old horror movie. The camera was shaky, as if it were being held by someone who was nervous or in a hurry. In the center of the room was a circle drawn on the floor, surrounded by candles. Strange symbols were etched into the ground, and in the middle of the circle stood a figure draped in a black hood. The figure began to chant in a language I didn't recognize. The words were guttural, almost inhuman, and they sent a chill down my spine. The camera zoomed in closer, and I could see that the figure was holding something knife. With a sudden, violent motion, they plunged the knife into the ground, and the screen went black. I thought that was the end of it. But then the image returned. This time, the room was empty, the circle and candles gone. The camera panned slowly, as if searching for something, and then it stopped. The figure was back, but now they were facing the camera. Their hood had fallen back, revealing a face that was wrong. The features were distorted, as if they had been stretched and twisted into something barely human. And then, the figure spoke. "You shouldn't have watched." The voice was deep, guttural, and filled with malice. But what terrified me the most was that it wasn't coming from the TV, it was coming from behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding, but there was no one there. The room was empty. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I had let the video get to me. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. 3. The stranger's warning. The next few days were a blur. Strange things started happening around the house. I would hear whispers when no one was there, see shadows moving out of the corner of my eye. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night to find the television on, static filling the screen. And then there were the dreams, vivid, terrifying dreams of the figure from the tape standing at the foot of my bed watching me. I tried to get rid of the tape, but it always found its way back. I threw it in the trash, and the next morning it was sitting on my coffee table. I buried it in the backyard, and that evening it was back in the VCR. It was as if the tape had chosen me, and there was no escaping it. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to destroy the tape once and for all. I took it outside, doused it in lighter fluid, and set it on fire. As the flames consumed the cassette, I felt a sense of relief. It was over. But then I heard it, the voice, low and menacing, coming from the flames. "You can't get rid of me." The fire suddenly flared up, and I stumbled back, falling to the ground. When I looked up, the figure was there, standing in the flames. Its twisted face was inches from mine, and I could feel its breath, cold and foul, on my skin. "You shouldn't have watched." And then everything went black. 4. The descent into madness. When I woke up, I was in my bed. The sun was shining, and for a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But then I saw the tape, sitting on my nightstand, untouched, and next to it, a note written in that same shaky handwriting, "You're mine now." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't obey. All I could do was watch as the figure stepped out of the shadows, its twisted face inches from mine, and then the screen went black. The origin of the tape. 5. The cult's downfall. The newspaper article mentioned that the cult had been experimenting with forbidden rituals, attempting to summon an entity they referred to as the Watcher. According to the notes left behind, The Watcher was an ancient being that existed between dimensions, feeding on fear and despair. The cult believed they could control it, using it to gain power and knowledge beyond human comprehension. But they were wrong. The ritual they performed was incomplete, and instead of binding the Watcher to their will, they unleashed it. The entity turned on them, consuming their minds and souls, leaving behind only empty shells. The tape, however, remained a cursed artifact that served as a gateway for the Watcher to enter our world. 6. The research. Desperate for answers, I decided to do some research. I took the tape to a local antique shop, hoping someone might recognize it. The shop owner, a frail woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose, examined the cassette with a frown. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "At a flea market," I replied. "Why? Do you know something about it?" She hesitated, then handed the tape back to me as if it were a live grenade. "I've heard stories about tapes like this. They're cursed. People who watch them, they don't last long." "What do you mean, they don't last long?" I asked, my heart racing. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They disappear. Or worse, whatever's on that tape is not of this world. My advice? Get rid of it. Burn it, bury it, do whatever you have to do. But don't watch it again." I left the shop feeling more terrified than ever. If the tape was cursed, why couldn't I get rid of it? Why did it keep coming back? 7. The ritual site. That night, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I had read about rituals to banish evil spirits, and I was willing to try anything. I gathered candles, salt, and a few other items I thought might help. I drew a circle on the floor of my living room, just like the one in the tape, and placed the cassette in the center. I lit the candles and began to chant, my voice shaking with fear. At first, nothing happened. Then, the room grew cold, and the candles flickered wildly. The tape began to vibrate, as if something inside it was trying to break free. Suddenly, the television turned on by itself. The screen was filled with static, and then the image of the hooded figure appeared. It stepped out of the circle, just like in the tape, and turned to face me. "You can't escape," it said, its voice echoing through the room. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The figure reached out, its twisted hand inches from my face. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The television turned off, the candles went out, and I was left alone in the darkness. The new victim. Emily's story. 8. Emily's curiosity. Emily had always been curious about the strange and unexplained. As a freelance journalist, she spent her days digging into urban legends, unsolved mysteries, and paranormal phenomena. So when she found the unmarked VHS tape at a thrift store, she couldn't resist. The label "Do Not Watch" only made her more intrigued. She took the tape home, unaware of the horror that awaited her. 9. The first viewing. Emily's perspective. That night, Emily set up her old VCR and inserted the tape. The screen flickered to life, showing the same dimly lit room and the hooded figure performing the ritual. She felt a chill as the figure turned to the camera and spoke those haunting words, "You shouldn't have watched." But Emily wasn't easily scared. She laughed it off, thinking it was just a poorly made horror film. That is, until she heard the whisper. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible. But as the days went by, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. She started seeing shadows moving in the corners of her vision, and her dreams were filled with the hooded figure, its hollow eyes staring into her soul. 10. The connection. Emily began to research the tape, determined to uncover its origins. Her search led her to an old online forum where she found a post from someone describing a similar experience. The post mentioned a name, Thomas. She dug deeper, eventually finding an article about a man named Thomas who had disappeared years ago after warning people about a cursed tape. The article mentioned a cult, a ritual, and an entity called the Watcher. Emily's curiosity turned to dread as she realized she wasn't dealing with an ordinary urban legend. This was real. 11. The Watcher's origins. Emily's research led her to an old, abandoned library on the edge of town. In the dusty archives, she found a book titled The Watcher, a history. The book described the Watcher as an ancient entity that existed between dimensions, feeding on fear and despair. It had been summoned countless times throughout history, always leaving destruction in its wake. The book also mentioned a way to weaken the Watcher, confronting it in the place where it was first summoned, but it warned that no one who had tried had ever returned. The final confrontation? 12. The ritual site. Emily's journey. Determined to end the curse, Emily tracked down the location of the cult's house. It was exactly as described, a crumbling, ominous structure surrounded by overgrown trees. As she stepped inside, she felt a wave of cold air and heard the faint sound of whispering. In the center of the room was the circle of candles, just like in the tape. Emily set up her own candles, using the symbols from the book, and began the counter ritual. The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped. The Watcher appeared before her, its twisted form more terrifying than ever. It reached out, its cold fingers brushing against her skin, but Emily stood her ground. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady. "You're just a reflection of my fear, and I won't let you control me." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Watcher let out a deafening scream, its form dissolving into shadows. The room grew quiet, and the candles flickered out. 13. The final ritual. Emily knew she had to act fast. The Watcher was growing stronger, and it was only a matter of time before it consumed her completely. She returned to the cult's house, determined to find a way to destroy the entity once and for all. In the basement, she found a hidden door she hadn't noticed before. Behind it was a small room filled with strange artifacts. Ancient books, jars of unknown substances, and a mirror that seemed to ripple like water. As she approached the mirror, she saw her reflection, but it wasn't her. It was the Watcher, staring back at her with its hollow eyes. "This is my domain," it said, "and soon it will be yours." Emily realized the truth. The mirror was a gateway to the Watcher's dimension. If she could destroy it, she might be able to sever its connection to our world. 14. The aftermath. When Emily woke up, she was alone. The Watcher was gone, but she could still feel its presence, a faint echo in the back of her mind. She knew it wasn't completely destroyed, it could never be. But it was weakened, and for now, that was enough. She returned home, exhausted but determined. The tape was still there, sitting on the table, but it was just a tape now. The curse had been broken, at least for her. But she knew it wasn't over. The Watcher was still out there waiting for its next victim. And the tape. The tape would find its way to someone else. It always did. The curse lives on. 15. The Watcher's domain. Emily thought she had weakened the Watcher, but she was wrong. The entity wasn't gone, it was biding its time, gathering strength. She began to notice strange occurrences again. Whispers in the dark, shadows that moved on their own, and dreams that felt too real to be just dreams. One night, she woke up to find herself not in her bed, but in the dimly lit room from the tape. The circle of candles was there, and so was the Watcher. But this time, it wasn't alone. Surrounding it were shadowy figures, people she recognized. Thomas, Sarah, and others she didn't know. Their eyes were hollow, their faces twisted in eternal agony. "You thought you could escape me?" the Watcher said, its voice echoing in her mind. "But you're mine now, just like them." Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to move, but her body was paralyzed. The Watcher reached out, its cold fingers brushing against her face, and she felt a surge of terror unlike anything she had ever experienced. And then she woke up. 16. The gateway. Emily knew she had to act fast. The Watcher was growing stronger, and it was only a matter of time before it consumed her completely. She returned to the cult's house, determined to find a way to destroy the entity once and for all. In the basement, she found a hidden door she hadn't noticed before. Behind it was a small room filled with strange artifacts. Ancient books, jars of unknown substances, and a mirror that seemed to ripple like water. As she approached the mirror, she saw her reflection, but it wasn't her. It was the Watcher, staring back at her with its hollow eyes. "This is my domain," it said, "and soon it will be yours." Emily realized the truth. The mirror was a gateway to the Watcher's dimension. If she could destroy it, she might be able to sever its connection to our world. 17. The final ritual, Emily's last stand. Using the knowledge she had gained from the books, Emily prepared a new ritual. She drew a circle around the mirror, using salt and symbols meant to banish evil. She lit candles and began to chant, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The room grew cold, and the air became thick with tension. The Watcher appeared, its form more solid than ever. It reached out, its cold fingers brushing against her skin, but Emily stood her ground. "You can't win," it said. "I am fear itself, and you are afraid." "Not anymore," Emily replied. "I'm not afraid of you." She smashed the mirror with a hammer, and the watcher let out a deafening scream. The room shook, and the walls seemed to close in around her. For a moment, she thought it was over. But then, she felt a cold, suffocating presence in her mind. The watcher wasn't gone. It was inside her. 18. The curse lives on. Emily returned home, exhausted but determined. She thought she had weakened the watcher, but she could still feel its presence, a faint echo in the back of her mind. She knew it wasn't completely destroyed, it could never be. But it was weakened, and for now, that was enough. She tried to move on with her life, but the curse followed her everywhere. She started seeing shadows that moved on their own, whispers in the dark, and dreams that felt too real to be just dreams. One night, she woke up to find herself not in her bed, but in the dimly lit room from the tape. The circle of candles was there, and so was the watcher. But this time, it wasn't alone. Surrounding it were shadowy figures, people she recognized. Thomas, Sarah, and others she didn't know. Their eyes were hollow, their faces twisted in eternal agony. "You thought you could escape me," the watcher said, its voice echoing in her mind. "But you're mine now, just like them." Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to move, but her body was paralyzed. The watcher reached out, its cold fingers brushing against her face, and she felt a surge of terror unlike anything she had ever experienced. And then she woke up. The warning. 19. The final warning. If you're reading this, if you found the tape, heed my warning. Don't watch it, don't let it in. Because once you do, there's no going back. The watcher is always watching, and it's hungry.